Welcome to the Founder to Leader podcast, where we unpack the human and relational dilemmas founders face when leading scaling organizations. I'm Johanna. I'm your host and program manager for the leadership development program with the same name, Founder to Leader. And in each episode, I'm joined by a founder, a researcher, and a leadership coach, each bringing their own unique perspectives to the dilemma. So let's get started. In this episode, we're talking about boundaries and what happens when expectations around responsibility, roles, and urgency are unclear. More specifically, we're unpacking dilemmas around mismatched expectations between founders and employees, the shift from being a friend to being a manager, and the risk of starting to parent your employees. And to help me unpack these dilemmas, I'm joined by founder Lasse Finderup, researcher Garmann Johnsen, and leadership coach Nina Uller. So Lasse, let's start with you. You are the CEO and co-founder of GoodTape, an AI-powered transcription tool used by 2.8 million people worldwide. And this is the third company that you're building. So looking back, what boundary has been the hardest to set for you as a founder?
I think for me, it's the boring answer, but it is to be my own leader, and know when to tell myself to stop working, and to know the boundary of when am I at work and when am I not at work, and to know the value of basically not working. Very much in two first companies, and it's probably the most valuable learning I've brought to this one now. So I feel a lot better, feel more invigorated in GoodTape than I have before.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. And thank you for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Christian, you are an associate professor at Copenhagen Business School, where you research how entrepreneurs and organizations navigate uncertainty, responsibility, and ethics. So based on your research, where do you see the biggest boundary confusion in modern work today?
So I think there are many boundaries that are becoming kind of increasingly blurred in contemporary work life. Like one boundary that I've been concerned with very much relates to Lasse's answer as well. It relates to the distinction between our private selves and our professional roles. And which for many are becoming increasingly blurred in contemporary work life. And of course, sort of relaxing this boundary is often kind of intended to sort of enable self-fulfillment, self-realization through work, right? So founders who are driven by passion, right? They seek kind of meaning through the ventures they create. But at the same time, as we heard, right, it sort of like creates this challenge of establishing and maintaining a kind of a meaningful distinction between our private lives and our professional roles. And I think often, like in the absence of a boundary set by the workplace, right, drawing this boundary often becomes then a sort of like responsibility placed on the shoulders of the individual, which can be extremely difficult for the individual to navigate, right? So when you can sort of like always sort of like open your smartphone and check your emails, right? How do you kind of create that distinction between your work and your life? And that's something that interests me in my research. Yeah.
Super interesting. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here as well.
And thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm also excited to get started. But before that, Nina, you are a leadership coach at Founder to Leader, where you bring more than 30 years of leadership experience spanning across tech, entrepreneurship, and the military. So in your experience, what's the most common boundary issue that founder leaders tend to struggle with?
I think it's all tying together from what I've heard from Lasse and Christian. It's really if you cannot, if you're not clear about the boundary between responsibility and relationships. So we have a deep drive to be relatable somehow, and that up against responsibilities that very often are like pushing uncomfort to somebody. So how can I do this without being not liked? So I want to be a good guy, but I also have to place this task somewhere. How do I do that? And very often it means that I need to do it myself. And that's not a very good path to go down. And I think that's also what you're talking about, Lasse, that you have learned. So it's this, can I keep my relationship and also hand over responsibilities and accountability to other people.
Got it. Thank you for that. So thank you all of you for being here. I think that we can all agree that setting boundaries is hard for most people, but I can argue that it's even more difficult in startups as well, where kind of roles are blurred or fluid, processes are kind of still being formed, and also founders tend to be very emotionally and financially tied to their companies, and the list can go on. So on that note, let's get started with our first dilemma. And before I read that out loud, just a quick disclaimer that all the names in the dilemmas, they are made up. So our first dilemma is from Isabel, and it's about a founder-employee mismatch around urgency and availability. And she writes, I'm really struggling with how to make my team care more and take more responsibility at work. When urgent things come up in the evenings or on the weekends, I of course make sure just to fix it, but most of my full-time employees will never open their computers after hours. I know that they don't have the same ownership or are as emotionally invested as I, and I don't expect them to do this every time, but I really can't understand why they don't have any sense of urgency at all when it's needed, or why they don't step up more. Do I have the wrong people, or are my expectations simply too high? So Lasse, is this a dilemma that you can see yourself in?
Yes. I think it's something most founders struggle with. I think there's like two sides of it. I think there's the thing of hoping that people will be as passionate about your project that you are yourself, and then at some point realizing they don't have as big of a stake in it. So can you expect it from them? But I think the first thing that I realized for myself was that I just assumed that they didn't have as big of a passion for the project that I did, because surely they can't, because I have much more stake than they do. That was for me the first mistake, because a lot of people can have a lot of passion and a lot of stake in it, even though they're not financially tied to it. Then for me, the other thing was to give, basically, if you want people to have a larger stake, then give them a larger stake. And not necessarily, you have to give them warrants or you have to give them equity in the company, but give them more. For me, it's what has worked very well is to give a lot of transparency. So really tell them this is the budget. This is how I see the intake of new customers every month. So people know what is urgent, what is going on. And one mistake I've made is to feel a lot of urgency and to take it all emotionally on board without giving that transparency on to the team, so that they know this is very urgent. And then just talking about feelings, like it's also it's a personal way of how do you lead and how do you share. But I very much lean into vulnerability as a leadership tool, and just talk openly about my feelings. So if there's something that bothered me a little bit or something that hurt my feelings, I'll tell the team very openly, so that they know, because otherwise you can sort of, it's like a dark spiral where you go, it's another time where I have to fix it. But you're not even sure that they know that how many things you fixed during the weekend. So you have to tell them, and you have to tell them if it hurts, because it clearly hurts. But do they know that it hurts?
Yeah, I would like to tie on to that. It's like if we as founders are absorbing all the tension, because that's like, it can be a lot of things. It could be, hey, I can do that. Hey, I should do that. If I'm not doing it, it's not going to be done as well as or am I really the only one seeing this? And then feeling a little bit better about myself doing that. So if you're absorbing this tension, it's like nobody knows about it. And it's also like how much urgency is within a contract, is within a role. And if there's a lot of urgency, is this something that we should talk about? It's like, do we have different categories, like red, green, yellow, and then who should be on duty in case somebody or a big customer is losing this or that? So it's exactly as you say, the transparency about that there is some urgency, and how can we amongst us handle that and look at it.
Yeah, fully agree.
But I could imagine that that's a potentially quite challenging or difficult conversation to have, because of course, as a founder, there might be things that feels very urgent for you, but maybe not for the employees. Is that something that you have reflected upon when you've had those conversations with your employees, Lasse?
Yeah, and then it becomes more of a culture thing than a leadership thing, in my opinion. That like if it's urgent for me as a leader, it should be urgent to employees as well. Of course, it depends on the issue, but I would guess that if this founder here in the weekend, if there's something urgent and they called one of their employees and said, I need help, that the employee would go, oh, of course, I'll open my computer and I'll help you. Because everyone's in it together. You're just sort of, it's also allowing yourself to ask, has been a big thing for me. We very much, so with Good Tape, I came into it a little hurt from the past two companies. So I went all the way over to work-life balance, basically leave your computer at work. And then now feeling more comfortable in asking, because you're also, people get a larger stake if they feel like they're more on the journey with you. And jumping on those things in the weekend isn't necessarily only a bad thing. It's also, wow, okay, you trust me enough to call me on a Saturday night. I'm the one you called. Is like it can be a positive thing. And I think that's like the self-leadership thing of just being like, hey, you're giving people agency, you're giving them basically part of the journey to be on this and sit, we're doing this, we're fixing this at night on a Saturday. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And just also remembering that these employees that we're going to talk about are all employees of startups. And they could have picked a job at Novo, but they picked a startup. And part of the journey of a startup is sometimes urgency, and that's the thrill of it. And when you look back at it,
What about you, Christian? How would you make sense of this dilemma through your research lens?
Yeah, I think I will just kind of elaborate on what Lasse has already said, because I think these are really kind of excellent reflection. I think kind of what you touch upon is that, like, how do we shift from making this only a responsibility of the founder to making it the responsibility of the team, right? And I think that's really important to think about how this dilemma is actually framed, right? Because if we simply frame this in individualized terms, then sort of like responsiveness to urgent matters, right, becomes seen as a kind of an indicator of how committed are you to this team. But that might be a sort of a problematic framing, because it might shift away the attention for some of the coordination and some of the dynamics within the team that needs to be placed in actually to be able to handle this dilemma, right? So I think alignment of expectations is really important, Erin. Those alignments need to, for instance, like just to take one example would be, it might be that the different members have different assumptions about what constitute an urgent matter, right? So addressing that and making sure there is a common understanding of what an urgent matter is. And then also, second of all, like thinking about kind of what practices needs to be in place when urgent matters arising, right? Who should be responsible for what? Who should be responding, right? And making sure also that it's not always the founder who has to take the kind of initiatives, right? And relatedly, like, thinking about, does the startup provide reasons for people to respond to these matters, and thinking about the kind of the expectations that need to be placed, and making sure that the sort of responsibility that people have is tied up to those expectations, right? So I think it's might be important to kind of like reframe this from simply a matter of personal commitment to also thinking about this as a kind of a question about how do you make sure that you are coordinated within this team, right? And that each person kind of takes responsibility that's sort of based on these more sort of collectively established expectations.
I really find it interesting what we talk about here, because it seems like one of the problem is that what Isabel is doing is kind of keep stepping in as well, and actually, as you say, then it doesn't give the team the responsibility maybe to step up, and it also trains the team then, of course, that someone else is going to solve it, so it's not really on my shoulders as well. And I want to go back a bit, because what I'm sitting and being curious is how do you how can you set those boundaries around what is urgent and what is not? You, Nina, you talked about maybe it's about, this is red, this is orange, this is green, etc. But I'm curious if you have seen the founders that you worked with, if they have done anything else, or maybe you, Lasse, as well in the founder role.
Well, I think that's very mature. kind of status in to have it that clear, but that's something to aim for. And also, as you say, Lasse, it's a matter of understanding how does the founder see things. So this not keeping things back, but sharing, and also learning from the expertise of the founder. So it's not that people are just going to do their bit of it, but it's like seeing it from a founder perspective, where there's like a 360 degrees horizon to be taken care of. How would they become mini founders and understanding what's important here? So it's definitely somewhere between being clear-minded, which can be difficult when you are busy. So it's like it is a dark spiral the more you take on. But I'm also a little bit curious about Isabel here is saying, of course, doesn't she? Of course, make sure just to fix it. So there is something in that I would definitely have asked Isabel about what is it just fixing it, because you're not teaching. The organization is not learning anything when you just fix it. Meaning you will have to fix it from now on, and you are then the kind of a magician who can do this. And they're like, this is not my responsibility because I would just not be able to do it the same way. So it's giving insight into what's happening. And also, as you are doing, Lasse, talking about how do I make people relevant in this organization. And when they're relevant, they learn, they feel good about themselves.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been characteristic, and just to be clear, I'm a lot better at talking about this than I am at doing. But I think a lot of when you're in startups, all the people that are in the startups want more. Like they want more of the startup experience. They're, at least in my experience, a lot of the people I work with are curious as to my daily life. Like they're like, oh, what? Tell me more. They always want to know more, which I love. And that then again, just saying this is part of it. It is part of the journey to when you're a founder. It's so cool, but it also means that your phone is never on fully silent. I'm happy now that we're in software, and if something breaks, it's not the end of the world. Before I was in travel, and so if a 19-year-old didn't get picked up on some dirt road in Cambodia, that was sort of like the end of the world. Too often. So for me, it's a lot easier now to put my phone on airplane mode when we're doing this podcast, whereas before it was like 1.5 hours of me not being available is kind of crazy. But we do, just to say that, we do the orange, red, green. So if we have a red, it's all hands on deck, and everyone knows that. Because we're a software company, it's mostly the dev team, but we also have a thing of the commercials. It's been a while since we've had it, luckily. But the commercials also just tap in and say, hey, I'm here. Even though it's also like I'm a non-technical CEO, so I can't do anything, but just letting people know I'm here. I'll have a look at if we get any emails, or just let me know. It gives comfort. So just saying, hey, I'm here is very important. And then getting to a green is like a celebration again. Yeah. And then I think just one thing that when I'm looking more at this, is that it's so easy to sit and say, just lead with vulnerability and take up and talk about your emotions. If you've never done it, it'll be super weird to come in on Monday and say, I'm hurt. But I think one thing that, again, and that's what made me realize I'm better at talking about it than I am at doing it, because we haven't done it in a while, is that we do what we call a retro, where everyone basically goes around the table, take 10 minutes to begin with. We write down things that are, I think we do, I like, I love, I wish, which becomes a structured room to say these things out loud. And then it would be super okay for the founder, for Isabel, to say, I wish when there was something urgent on a Saturday that I felt it was okay to call you guys. Because then I think everyone would say, oh, it's okay, just call us. But it's really about setting that room of, because where do you open up about vulnerability.
But I think what you're talking about is also relates to the fact that it's really important to make some of the more implicit assumptions to make that explicit, right?
Yeah.
To actually articulate it within the team, right?
Yeah.
So that instead of people just running around and having their own expectations in their head and thinking about you should do that or I should do that, right? To actually kind of share it, right? And make it get explicit.
Yeah.
And then it's possible to open up this space where we can sort of together think about like, what do we need to do now, right? Are we in a situation of urgency, right? And how can we now coordinate how we together tries to solve this situation, right? And if these assumptions just remain kind of implicit, then you might end up in a situation where one person feels that like, oh, this is really urgent, it needs to be handled now. But other people might think that, yeah, I can see it's important, but why cannot this wait until tomorrow, for instance, right? So making those kind of implicit assumptions, making them explicit and coordinating, that's super important, I believe, and that's what you're touching upon here.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about also, that's in my language, that would be, how do you collect your data? So how does she know that they don't have a sense of urgency? And that's linking back to what you said. It's like, how on earth, so could she start saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or how did you feel about that? Gaining some data on this. And this is not for assessing or judging anybody. It's for understanding what's going on. And that's what you're saying about the assumptions that can be hidden. And it de-dramatizes a lot.
Yeah.
When things come out, it's not the shame that I didn't know or I didn't do. It's like, that's how we people are, and we're in it, all of us together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also about making people feel safe. Because if they can feel if you come in on Monday and you were annoyed about having to do something Sunday. Of course they can. But if you don't say it out loud, then they don't know what you're annoyed about. We do every Monday, we do like a check-in, and we would just go around the table and say how we're feeling. It takes a little bit of time, and we'll see how we do it when we're more people. We're 11 now, and it takes a little while, but it's nice. And again, the way I explain it to new employees is it's actually more for your colleagues than it is for yourself, that you get to speak your mind, because then if you're annoyed about something, I might go, oh, I did miss that deadline last Thursday and you were waiting for me. But then if you say Sunday, oh, I had a big fight with my partner or something, then I'm like, oh, okay, you're not annoyed at me, you're just in a bad mood. And the same for the founder. Like, everyone looks at the founder for something. So if Isabel comes in every Monday that she's had to do something urgent and feels annoyed, then it'll be a big plus to say it is because of you guys. And they would feel safer for that, because then they know how to fix it.
Absolutely.
But if she doesn't, they just go, ooh.
So if I am to summarize, and if we go back to Isabel's question of, do I have the wrong people, or are my expectations simply too high? It might be, Isabel, that the expectations are not clear at the moment. And what I'm hearing from my guests around the table here is that instead of stepping in, ask your employees to step up and give them that responsibility to solve problems themselves. And with that, of course, comes working on setting boundaries and having conversation around what means, like, what does urgent mean? And also who owns what. So not everything falls on the founder then. And also in your leadership practice, prioritize finding spaces to test the assumptions that you have. Like, it sounds now, for example, that there's an assumption that the employees doesn't care as much as I do. So found spaces and outlet to actually test that and coordinate and talk and put things on the table instead of kind of internalizing all of that.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our second dilemma. And that is from Adam, who struggles with the transition from friend to manager. A quick note, this podcast is brought to you by Founder to Leader, Denmark's most established leadership development program for founders with personnel responsibility. The program combines organizational psychology with experiential learning and is delivered by Copenhagen Business School and the Danish Industry Foundation. It's free to participate, so read more and apply at foundertoleader.dk. And he says, I'm managing more than 10 employees, most of them around the same age as me. I want to be an inspiring and visionary leader for them and for us to build things together as a team and have a great culture, but I don't want to be a boss. My main challenge is when it comes to the social part. I get so uncomfortable when they, for example, go out together on Fridays because I'm never sure if I should join them or not. If I don't go, I feel bad for not going and I assume they see me as the boring boss. But if I do go, I worry they will respect me less as a leader. What's the right answer here? So, Christian, I'm not going to ask you what's the right answer here, but I will ask you, how would you make sense of this dilemma from your research perspective?
Yeah, I think I will just start by saying that, like navigating these kind of social events in a professional kind of work-life setting is a real dilemma, right? And can be really kind of difficult to know how to kind of manage that, right? And I think the difficulty stems from the fact that these situations, they kind of often blurs different expectations, right? Expectations that mix together expectations from the workplace and expectations that stems from our more kind of social life, right? And in my own research, I've used a concept developed by a British anthropologist, Victor Turner, a concept called liminality, to make sense of this. And liminality refers to this situation of being in between, right? So you neither need this nor that. You are in this kind of social limbo where normal distinctions are kind of blurred. So if we think about kind of a workplace social event, it's neither proper work, but neither is it kind of proper kind of a social life, right? So on the one hand, right, it often takes place outside, the normal work setting, right? So you're removed from some of the daily kind of work routines. And then on the other hand, it still is shaped by some of the kind of professional roles that we have, right? And as a result of that, I think when we are entering into these spaces, roles become very ambiguous, right? So for a manager, like in this example, right, entering this kind of liminal space of a social event in the workplace, am I acting now as a manager or am I acting as a friend, right? It becomes a kind of a blurring of those two roles, right? And as a result of that, it becomes ambiguous what kind of behavior is appropriate, right? And what expectations now apply? Do others see me as a friend or do others see me as the manager still, right?
Yeah.
And I think like I as you said, I don't have a kind of, like an easy answer to how to solve this. But I think one way to perhaps kind of approach this dilemma is also to then kind of to acknowledge, right, this sort of liminal nature of these situations rather than trying to kind of resolve it entirely, right? And for a manager, right, it might be kind of helpful to simply just recognize that they cannot just step out of their role as a manager when they are entering into these social events in the work life setting, right? And even in these kind of more informal social settings, right, there still is power relations. There still is kind of role-based expectations, right?
Absolutely.
And perhaps being aware of those constraints, right, and sort of acting reflexively within that rather than kind of believe that your role is completely suspended, right? I think that is one way to try to kind of navigate this, right? So I think that's,
I think you're right. So in the Founder to Leader program, we're talking about that the leader will never be part of the group as such, but will be guiding the boundaries. So it's like how it's totally being in the knowledge of I am. I will be. I will feel that I'm drawn into being part of the group because it's an awful thing for us people to not belong to all these good people and they are super good and I want to be happy along with them. However, I do have a duty, and as you say, it belongs to the power structure. The founder will always be the one who will be followed. Which kind of jokes can you talk? As a founder, you're the one giving a raise or not, in basically holding their lives in the hand. So they need this valve I would say, of getting rid of pressure. And if you as a founder can be doing things in a way where they know how can they read you, like going in there, having a beer, saying, see you later, I'm going home. And then they know that you're there, showing up, and then you leave. And then they can have their talks because they need that. And it's basically also being conscious about why do we do the social gatherings. It's not just because it's something that somebody has to have, it's because something has to happen there. So it's like being mindful about what is happening and how can I contribute in the best possible way.
For me, it's been like the journey of realizing that being a leader is not all glory. Like I think a lot of people, if they knew it, they wouldn't want it. And that's also why I think Founder to Leader is such a good program, because it sort of makes you realize these things more concretely. They like the thing of you can't let loose with who you might view as your friends, but they are your employees. You can't let loose. You can't just go, oh, tonight I'm just gonna drink until I faint. You have to sort of, and also like you have to set the space for them to talk about you sometimes, to get those frustrations out, and then when they're out, they will disappear. But then I think there's the other part of I worry they'll respect me less as a leader. I think that's very much, for me at least, an internal thing. It's a confidence thing. If I keep telling myself, I know I'm good at my job. I know I'm good at my job. And I think people can tell if I'm confident, and then they respect me more. And it's something like, for example, as I mentioned before in the retros, where I think at some point, I can't remember what I brought up, but then they said, no, we respect you a lot. I was like, okay, cool. And that has sort of just kept me confident in my way of leading. But I think this it's sort of a two-part. You cannot be one of the employees when you're a leader. You can't be in that group, which you just inherently is not. Are not. And then the thing of I worry they'll respect me less as a leader is, for me, very much just an internal thing. Like that's just about you being confident. And I am assuming they see me as a boring boss, but if I do go out, like it's all just and then I would say it out loud and say, hey, I do want to join, but I need to go.
Or ask, do you see me as a boring boss?
Yeah. Do you see me as boring if I don't get really drunk and pass out? Yeah. And then of course it depends on the culture of the company. Like if we don't have a large we almost never drink alcohol at our company. We did a lot in the past, not in this one, in the previous company. So it's less of a thing for us, at least, because alcohol just brings less what's it called, inhibitations? No, less boundaries. People say more things that they wouldn't have said. So it's less of a thing with us. Yeah, and then also, just to say this, it's also important that the leader or the founder finds their outlet, because they need to be able. You as a leader need to be able to say to a friend, and this is gonna like good tip, and please don't put this too much into this, but you need to be able as a leader to say to someone, "Oh, this employee is just being annoying," or something, to just get it out, because you can't say it to an employee. You can't say, "Oh, this other employee is being very annoying." So you need to find an outlet, whether that's with a partner or friends or where that is. It's just not with your employees. You can't use them as an outlet, in my opinion, at least. Yeah.
I totally agree. That's probably where you would have some benefit from a coach as well.
Yeah.
It's like, as we talked about Isabel, she's getting resentful because of this. Are they this, So it's like, no, it's not the employees, it's not you, it's being human.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels almost illegal to want to say something that you're frustrated about something with your team. So find a very safe space so it doesn't somehow I won't find the way to wherever you talk about. But yeah, just know employees get frustrations. Of course, you as a leader get frustrations and need to speak your mind.
But I think it also was something super interesting and important in what you say about how the founder also needs to perhaps also create a space for the team to share their frustration without that person being present, right? Which also implies that one way of dealing with this might also be that you're joining for the first part of the social event, but then you retreat, right? So that might also be a way of establishing boundaries, right? And then something that you also reflected on was, the fact that what are the expectation here of the founder, which relates also to this distinction between leader and a boss, right? So this founder wants to be a kind of a more visionary lead, right? And don't want to be the boring boss. And I think that's a kind of a distinction that's become quite established today, in the sense that, being a leader is associated with being visionary, right? And being a boss is associated with kind of hierarchy and formal authority and so forth, right? And perhaps that distinction also needs to be called into question here, right? And just accept that, when you are a manager for a team, there is also some formal authority in this, right? There is also some formal hierarchy involved in that. And perhaps that's not something that should be shied away from, but perhaps also acknowledged, right?
I totally agree to that. So the moment that you step up and take authority, people will start projecting their anxiety, as we say here. It's like, where should I put all my bad feelings about this? And it goes, whether we want it or not, to the boss. And this, I totally agree, the boss term, it's like, you could be visionary, you can be fun, you can be all sorts of things, as long as you're not the boss. It's like, I just have to be different, and then I have to figure out my new role that is not like the bosses I have seen. And it becomes, I have to be in some way in order to be accepted. Or there is a lot of interesting talks in that. Why is it that I cannot be boring as long as this is actually for the best of the company?
So if we were to summarize the takeaways for Adam, so what I'm hearing is that as a leader, you will never be part of the group, but you're there to guide boundaries. And that means that you need to constantly kind of negotiate with yourself, because you can't step out of the role as a manager and the power structure and dynamics that come with that. So one practical advice for this particular situation might be to join for parts of the Friday bar, maybe a couple of drinks at the office, and then when they go out, you go home. And let the employees kind of have their own outlet there. And what you, Lasse, were talking about before, that so it's important for you, Adam, to find new outlets for yourself, if that previously have been your employees, if they have been friends. And then I'm also hearing that this discomfort is maybe not a sign that something is wrong, but rather that something is changing and your role is transitioning from a friend to a manager. And in that transition, there might feel like a loss. It might be feeling equal to the employees. It might this social ease, etc. But leadership, it involves giving something up, not just gaining responsibilities. Anything you would like to add?
Just that there might also be cultures where it can be a positive thing for the leader to go out. I was just thinking about, like, if I had a leader and they went out with the team and then they broke it down on the dance floor or something and then left. Like, it also becomes like, then, oh, my leader is also very fun and I like them and I want to talk about them. And like, so you can also turn it into a thing. Just don't lose control, I think, is maybe the thing. Like, you can join, you can go out and you can sit and just sit in the corner and talk with people. It's just to say you're not banned from joining the party. Just be aware of how you're acting.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to our third and our last dilemma. And that is from Miranda, who feels like a parent to her employees. And she writes, I'm getting really tired of feeling like a mom to my team. I often have to remind people of really basic things like showing up on time and checking on their progress instead of them just doing it themselves. I think I'm too much of a people pleaser, so I often end up just doing everything myself. But I'm getting really tired of it and I'm getting frustrated with them. I've managed to bite my tongue so far, but how do I change this without them getting upset? So Nina, where do you normally start kind of boundary-wise when working with a founder like Miranda?
I'm really listening to their words because that tells a lot. And what I hear here is that she's feeling like a mom, and that's probably the diagnosis of what's happening within the organization very well. And I also hear that something about it. People pleaser, I'll be coming back to that. And this biting her tongue to me is like, it's close to not being honest. And it can only add up resentment in her. And when you talk like an angry mother to somebody, they will respond as a unresponsible or irresponsible child. So that's where I would be. I'm still listening to the words of her. So this, of course, and I'm sure Miranda can see that when she sees her words on a piece of paper like that. As long as you do everything for your team, like the little things that are really like the kids' stuff, why should they bother? And they might not even again be aware that this is lacking because it's like, yeah, if I'm late, I'll hear about it if it's wrong, or if I don't do that, somebody will remind me, and that is in Miranda. So that's just basically that there is no structure for them to step up to their roles, and it's not clear what is their responsibility, even though there are roles, because she must have had some definition about what they should do. So there's definitely something about what has to be done. And then I'm struck by the people pleaser, and there is always, when we do boundaries, when we ask about tasks, it's a thing from inside out. How would people like that I say this? That's one thing. So it's like pleasing, or I don't want to interrupt their whatever pleasant way of having a day today, because then they don't like me. That's the people pleaser in it. But there can also be a not a people pleaser, but the fact that Miranda actually feels like a good person when she's doing all these things. Like she's absorbing the tension. Wow, I'm being a good leader doing that. I can handle all situations. I keep the big overview of everybody here, so I'm there. And if I am feeling like an imposter in many ways, that's like, then I'm busy. I'm doing this, and then I feel that I'm the leader, because that leadership thing, whatever that is, if it's not kind of pulling everything together, I don't know exactly what it is then. So it's a lot of looking inside. What is it that she's afraid of? And also understanding that, again, care and responsibility, she can take care of people, be caring. And if she's not saying things as they should be, in a way that people are producing or creating the results that they should do, she's basically burning the economy of the company in order not to be looked upon as somebody who's not likable. And that's a very common thing. So I'm, in an easy way, of course, we all do this, just to say that. But I have a very good rule of thumb, is to say, are you doing this to be good enough or to do good? So is it for you, this not saying anything, not disturbing people, clearing up everything? Or is it because that's what the company needs in this moment? So that's and then when you ask yourself that question, then you can step into the role. And the role and the person is what we so easily confuse again with the relationship and responsibility. So knowing that this is the best for the company, it also gives you a platform to talk from. You can say, at least internally, you can say, yeah, I know it must be annoying that you should be on time. However, if you're not here, if you are working half days rather than full days, you are wasting our budget. So, and I'm sure you can see that.
Mhm.
But the first thing is to let her feel to take up the authority and understand that that is her role in her taking care of the resources.
Yeah, I think it's also been a thing for me that I had this not this necessarily of feeling like a mom or a dad, but not knowing where the boundary of my role was, and then I spoke up and said I sometimes want to put my foot down. I think I said, and then the response was you should.
Yeah.
So there's also the firm can be good, also for a leader because we don't know how big the team is, but let's say it's a team of 10, then maybe she's talking about 5 people, meaning there's also 5 other frustrated people. So if someone is constantly late, then it's not the task of their colleague necessarily. That would be nice if they did it, but it's your job to say as a leader, dude, be on time. So and that will be very nice for the rest. I would be surprised if she has a team of only people that are late and only people that don't check in. We had an example where and it was brought up and we've talked about it a lot, so I can bring it up. We had an example of we first of all, people were a little bit late to meetings. Like they might come into the room at the time that it started, but then it took like a couple of minutes for us to be ready to have the meeting. So that was a thing that we talked about, and I said, the meeting starts. Like this is not a wild thing. You have to be ready, which also means if we have a meeting at 10, you don't come to work and open the door at 9:59. Like you have to be ready. And then there was another thing of a guy, lovely guy, had a great time, but in the middle of a meeting, he just stood up while someone else was talking and went out and got some yogurt and came back and just sat and ate the yogurt in the middle of a meeting. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? And I brought it up after and I was like, that's just a complete no-go. Like I got close to angry and then I took it back because clearly no ill intent. But that was like a thing for me of like, what are you doing? And then if I had just gotten frustrated and then he did it again, then maybe I had gotten angry and said like in a not so nice way. So sometimes being firm can also be a favor to others. And then just also realizing some people are just not as structured. So they need a firmer, listen, you have to get in before this time. And some people you can do so much and you can tell them so many times, but it's just not their natural being. And being a very structured person, it's something I've struggled with, to be like, well, it's not that fucking hard to just be on time. But then just for some people it is. And that's fair. And then you just have to work around that and be like, well, then you have to be in 10 minutes before everyone else, meaning you'll be in at the same time. So there's a lot there of just allowing yourself to be a little bit more firm, which can again sometimes feel a little bit illegal to say, almost in 2026 in Denmark, to say you can also sometimes put on your boss pants and say you have to be on time. Yeah,
that's actually the role.
Yeah.
That's where the money lies.
Yeah.
No, I will say I completely agree with what's already been said, right? And I think these are kind of really important reflections here, right? And when I was listening to this dilemma, I was also thinking about this from a kind of a research perspective, right? That I think like one of the sort of like unique challenges in a startup is that, organizational structures are not naturally given. They have to be created, right? And I think, research also kind of, in a way, sort of, warn against sort of romanticizing the sort of like undesigned entrepreneurial organization, right? For precisely the reason that sort of like the absence of more sort of formal structures and formal decision-making procedures might lead to kind of ambiguity and overload and founder burnout and so forth, right? So I think, at the core of this challenge also is this kind of ambiguity around like task assignment and responsibility, right? And specifically, like who is responsible for what, at what point does responsibility shift, right? And when is responsibility completed, right? So from the founder's perspective, if you think about this, right? This situation might sort of manifest as frustration, right? Like tasks are delegated, but they do not appear to be solved. And then the founder has to step in and try to solve them, right? But from the employee's perspective, of the team members' perspective, this dynamic might also create ambiguity and uncertainty, right? Because if tasks are delegated, but then later revoked or solved by someone else, might be sort of unclear for them, right? Like where do their responsibility begin and where does it end, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
if the founder sort of steps in once, right, it might sort of create the expectation that the next time, right, will the founder do this again, right? Which does not mean that the founder should not necessarily step in if a task is completed. But I think there needs to be some learning involved in that,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So if the founder steps in, it needs to be kind of made explicit. Like in this case, I stepped in, but the next time, right? We need to make sure it sort of works out in a very different way, right? And then of course also to kind of demarcate some of the lines of responsibility, right? Like when a task is delegated, right? Uh, what kind of room of maneuver do the employees have for like, autonomy in terms of solving it in their own way? And to what extent should then the founder also be involved in kind of making sure that it's sort of aligned with overall aims, right? So I think those kind of challenges of coordination, basically, right, is something that research also kind of deals with, which I very much seeing also being kind of reflected in the dilemma that we're seeing here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think this ambiguity, if I
Yeah.
can link onto yours,
Yeah.
it's for me, boundaries are always something about regulating. It's like we can never find the balance. Work-life balance doesn't exist. It's regulating all the time, and that's an active move. So it's and that also shows how complex actually the leadership role is, because there are so many dimensions where you have to regulate. And you are the one calling numbers, Lasse. You are regulating what's going on in there. So, and that is setting boundaries. And about delegation, because it's a thing. Most people say just delegate. You're so busy, just delegate. And it's like delegation is probably the most difficult part at all. And I've unfortunately forgotten the name. There is a new book. The way they approach delegation is to say it's about you not teaching people how you think. So that they're this is a very frameworkish way of doing it. It's like to be sure that you have a review or a retro or whatever afterwards. And the first question you ask is, what challenges did you have? And then walk me through how you thought about it. So this is telling people there will be things they don't know about it, which is also de-dramatizing the whole thing. And then they walk you through what they thought, and then you can have a talk about that, about what you might see, what they didn't see. And then I love the last question is, what was really easy? What came without you knowing? You just did it, because that's such an easy way to, amplify their power in this field.
Yeah.
So it's about sharing the expertise, and then you can delegate to people, and then they feel like the power. Then that's where the energy comes, because they feel they can put their whole body into this thing, because they know that it's secure, and that there is expectations that it will run off somewhere, but I can talk about it and learn from it later on. And then that learning in the organization is the most important part. Otherwise, we don't develop.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, which is extremely important, is also to think about this in a kind of more processual way, right? That like patterns in a startup can emerge over time, right? So practices can kind of give precedence to what will happen next, right? So
Yeah.
you have to think about constantly how you regulate this, right? And how do you establish a kind of a healthy pattern around how kind of responsibility is.
And
is
picking up that this is it might of course be you doing something because you will do something, and part of that will not be maybe the most ideal. Mostly we know that afterwards. But it's like the thinking from the inside is sometimes not. It's preventing this whole thing about knowing the patterns. Not being clear, and this is the whole thing about picking up data, thinking about picking up data about, is this me? What's happening? Am I regulating? Am I a little afraid of not being liked, or do I not want to do things like, I remember a startup that definitely didn't want to do things like they did in Deloitte. That was almost the way their identity was, that we do everything different from that. So, of course, that can be an inspiration, but it's also kind of a cage if you don't take care of it.
Yeah, and I think I like the word regulating. It's the first time I've heard that being used, but it is definitely like a thing that I've learned is also that you sort of like I can work 12 hours straight if I'm just working, but then if I have to go out and do 3 one-to-ones in a day, that's a whole other taxing thing. Like it takes it's a different type of battery, or it's the same battery, but it's more taxing in a way. And then setting up the boundaries is also sort of protecting yourself a little bit.
Absolutely.
And going, I don't want to have to do these regulations every month. I'm going to fix the issue by setting up something that makes sure that I don't have to regulate this ongoingly. And just, again, being a leader is not old glory.
No.
Sometimes I've said this out loud to many people. I've gone like, oh, damn, it would be nice to just be an employee at a corporate something. Oh, it would be nice. And just leave at 4. And then that issue that is over there, it's not on my table. Because you're sort of, if you're on a football team and you're the guy in Danish, the bagerste mand, you just have to run for it. You can't just go, I missed that. You have to run for it. All types of issues. And that includes the emotionally taxing, cultural, weird things of having to say to someone that might be older than you. Adam is a manager for someone that's the same age, but you might also have someone that's significantly older and say, you have to be on time. And it can feel weird to say, I'm 29, and luckily my colleagues are all good at that. But if I had, like, let's say a 55-year-old, I might feel weird having to tell them to be on time. So yeah, setting up the structures and saying, listen, we're on time.
So this is where I am, as the coach would ask, why do you feel weird about that? And that would maybe come up with some assumptions about how would they feel about that. So there is so much holding us back that is actually never, it's a fantasy, as we talk about. It's just the assumption about that would happen. And it's actually a skill to be able to recognize when that comes up. And when you do that, then you can ask yourself, would I really be afraid of that guy? Even though he looks like my uncle or my dad even, maybe not. Maybe, again, I would spend the money wiser by addressing this and eat my own, whatever it is.
I agree.
I would like to talk maybe also about this short about when you create boundaries, when you make things recognizable. Another word for that is also structure. And it's like structure has somehow become a forbidden word sometimes. It's like that will just be kept back in all the structure. You can also look upon structure as something you have already cleared, boundaries that are set, and now you can work, you're protected by the structure. And you have time to be innovative or do your work and so on. You know exactly that is to the right, that is to the left, and this is where I'm going. So again, it's about regulating, but not seeing structure as an enemy as such.
Yeah, it's the same. We recently, last week before, I sort of outlined the strategy for 2026 of, like, professional. This is ICP. This is who we're building for. This is how we're going to do it. And that it was like a very nice sense of alignment. And then if you do the same for culture, like a strategy for your culture or whatever you want to call that, and say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, that also aligns people, and then you can move a little bit faster, that no one is going out there and then I have to go out and get them. Metaphorically, of course. It might also go and get yogurt, and then I have to go and get them. But yeah, like a being structure. Yeah, that's true. It's become like a especially for, I hear it more from young people. I'm young myself, I hope. But yeah, like structure or strategy or whatever we want to call it, it gives a little bit of sense of, oh, I know where I'm going, which can be nice. Feel safer.
And I guess also kind of part of setting that boundary, right? So I completely agree that like some expectations needs to just be communicated very clearly, like you show up on time on meetings, right? There's also, in relation to this delegation of task, right? Founder might initially in a startup be involved in everything, right? Because there's very few people, right? And then as the startup grows, right, more and more of that control has to be delegated to others, or and you as a founder cannot be involved in kind of all the details of everything that's happening, right? So you have to kind of set a boundary around like, what's then your own responsibility? To what extent am I involved in the tasks that are being delegated, right? Which does not necessarily mean that you shouldn't be involved, but there has to be some kind of clear kind of, division of labor or clear kind of expectations that when a task is delegated, this is the kind of autonomy that's delegated in terms of specifically designing that task, right? And the role of the leader in supporting then the employees to take kind of ownership over solving a specific task, right? And I guess that's also kind of a difficult boundary that has to be negotiated and regulated, right? To use that kind of expression, right? And thinking about kind of like, ways to do that in a good way, right? Yeah.
I think there's also a bit of a danger, because the moment you do leadership right, I would almost postulate, you become redundant, more or less. And nobody likes that, actually. So it's this being the one who has the answer and always can show up and know everything better than other people. It's way more sexier than saying, how would you solve that? It sounds like, I don't know, how would you do it? But that's the way you train people into thinking themselves, not that I'll just pick whatever comes out of the brain of the one who knows everything. And one thing is knowing, another thing is daring to decide on behalf of the founder. I remember one who really tried to delegate a coachee, and it was so difficult to get people to catch the things. And we talked about it was really because they didn't dare to do things the way he did. So they didn't dare to take the kind of decisions. So this training that you could actually take the same kind of decisions as they're delegated, and you know your authority or your mandate, then you can also take risky decisions. And by risky, I mean not personally risky. And that's within the boundaries, within the role, and that's where the regulation also have to be.
So if I put this together,
good luck.
It sounds like, thank you. It sounds like the key takeaways for Miranda here is, first of all, when you show up as a frustrated mom, it is quite likely that people on the other side will kind of step into this like non-responsible child. So that's just a dynamic to be curious about and aware about. And also this over-functioning creates under-functioning. And when you keep stepping in, it prevents other from stepping up. And that behavior kind of unintentionally teaches that you don't really need to own this. Like, I will catch it instead. So it's about figuring out these boundaries as where does my employees' responsibility and the decision-making and tasks, where does that begin and where does that end? And also think about speaking more from the role rather than the person, and thinking about, do I want to do this or not? I feel uncomfortable, and more what's good for my company. And it gives you a platform to speak from, so it doesn't feel so personal when things get a bit uncomfortable. And structures is actually a way of protecting yourself. So then think about like, what do I, as a leader, what do I expect from my employees? Like, what are the ground rules that I want to put in place? And then I also like what we talked about here, that this being firm can actually be a favor to other people, both these employees that are actually not performing because they might be that they lack those boundaries, it's not clear for them, but also if there are employees within the company that really are high performers, is also a favor to them to kind of raise the bar a bit of what you expect. And then also something around that care is not only stepping into like a parent role. There are many ways of being caring. One of them is ensuring that the company and its operation run as smooth as it possibly can. That's also a very clear way of being, of caring. Anything you would like to add?
No.
I think that was,
was good.
impressive.
Very well.
Like,
Thank you. Challenge accepted and completed. But then that was it, unfortunately. So thank you so much to Lasse and Christian and Nina for being here with me. And to everyone listening, thank you so much to tuning in to the Founders Leader podcast. I'll speak to you next time. And if you like what you heard today, please remember to subscribe, review, and share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.